All right, welcome to The Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And I'm here with my co-host, Reggie D. Ford.
Yeah, what's up, Steve?
How's it going?
Good. Yeah.
I like the shirt.
Thank you. Represent Tupac and a rose growing from a crack in the concrete. So, yeah, I think that is an epitome of my life and the journey that I've been on. And Rosecrete is a significant brand and name for me. I've started businesses with that name, and just thought it'd be fitting for this episode.
Yeah, this one is going to be special. It could be kind of intense too. You know, we're going to talk about ACEs and trauma and stigma in the BIPOC community, and I really can't wait to get into this and introduce our guest in a minute. You know, Reggie, you were on the show, a few weeks ago, and something you did, which it was not planned, it was unscripted, was that you said, because we always ask this question at the end, or try to, which is like, what's something you're reading or watching or listening to, or it's in your queue? And you said, well, actually, I've written something. And I was like, oh, let's go. And then you started to read this poem on grief, and there were two sides of me. One side was like, nobody say anything after that, we're done. But the other side of me was so inspired that we kept talking a little bit after that.
We have talked about it, and I appreciate that. And I forgot that was the question that led to that, me reading that, because it sounds vain when I hear it now. But I think I don't know, just like what's something that you're reading right now? My own stuff. like I'm only reading stuff by Reggie D. Ford. But no, but I'm so glad I shared it. And but we're the poetry, and I know you write a little bit as well. And we're thinking about doing a poetry slam.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thinking about doing a poetry slam in Nashville around mental health.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We're working on that actively right now. Poetry has been a big part of my life, actually. Since I was pretty young, I would write pretty regularly. And then when I got into this very kind of rigorous portion of my life with a licensed professional counselor, I would write a poem every day and just use it as a way to wake up in the morning and unclog the pipes, sort of, get out the negativity. It was very stream of consciousness. Sometimes it was just paper you should probably throw away once you're done with it, and I wouldn't look back. Yeah. But then once in a while, this prose would come out of it, or something like a business model would come out of it. Like,
wow.
It's like all of a sudden, like you're just tapping into it, and once you get the water flowing, it's like any other kind of plumbing. It's like you got your plumbing hair clogged. It's like that's going to be a problem. Like if you can't breathe, that's going to be a problem. And it feels like that with me with poetry, is that it's just like, hey, get it out. It's good.
Yeah, I like that. Writing has been a big part of my life, and I realized that it was poetry as well. Even when I go to write just regular stuff, in my poetry, I like to rhyme. And so I'm like, okay, how do I make this word rhyme with this word? And a lot of times I'll start my first sentence with orange, and I'm like, damn. And so a lot of poems get stuck right there. Joking. I'm joking, but
you write a lot about oranges.
I write a lot about oranges. Yeah, exactly. But I got a poem that I used to close out a lot of my talks with last year. Yeah. And can I spit it?
Yeah.
All right. It's about being present. It's a lot of my philosophy baked into it.
Let's go.
Right now is all we have, because the past no longer exists, and the future never was. So right now, this is it. They ask me why I do what I do, and this is what I tell them. I get on podcasts, I get on stages, and I speak about my pain in hopes that no one else has to feel them. Because the pain from my past does not dictate the present, and the fear of the future only worries me if I let it. All I have is now, a moment to share with you, to tell you about my past and all the pain I went through. Abused and neglected, a lot that's hurt me, but I rise above it, and you can too. Just keep working. Take your losses and turn them into lessons. Give grace and give back. That's the weight of many blessings. Speak with conviction and love with no conditions. Stand tall, stand proud, and unlearn unhealthy traditions. Follow your passion and believe in your visions. Fall in love with the process and stay firm in your intentions. Trust that the results will be a byproduct of the work. And don't bottle up emotions, because as we know, bottles can burst. Create the life you choose to live and surround yourself with those you love. Give thanks for every breath and linger with every hug. For all we have is now, this moment, this day. Spread light and love everywhere you go and tell people that's the Boost way. How you like that?
That's the Boost way. That, my friends, is the Reggie D. Ford way. And with that, we'll take a brief break and we'll be back with the wonderful Moushumi Sen. All right, welcome back to The Boost. And I'm delighted to be here with Moushumi Sen, who came a long way to Nashville, Tennessee from California.
Hi.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm well. It's kind of chilly outside today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, and tomorrow it's going to be like 70 or 80 or something. But today you got the cool day. I grew up in California for a long time. I was there for, 30 years maybe. And I lived for a portion of that time in North San Diego County and Orange County, where it was 72 and sunny all day, every day.
Jealous.
Yeah, but you're in the Bay.
Yes, we get fog, we get rain, the marina effect, name it. It's been rainy out there as of late. Pretty windy and rainy, so.
Is it an El Nino year? Is it like, do you get any of that stuff up in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, the wind gusts are pretty high. I heard things were flying around in my backyard, so.
Oh, gosh.
Whoa.
Okay.
Well, you
That'll
might have
do
come
it.
to Tennessee just in time.
Just to
How about
escape
that?
for a little bit.
And you did some Nashville things. You got some hot chicken
Got some
last
hot
night, you
chicken.
said. Have you done anything else fun or want to do anything fun after this?
I'm going to get to that hike,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you.
that place with the steps that you mentioned
Yeah,
earlier.
I'm thinking Percy Warner, but don't quote me on that. But
Possibly.
yeah, it'll be
I
good.
saw the green and that was it for me.
Yeah, we got a lot of that out here. Yeah, it's beautiful out here to be so close to so much outdoor space. Like, you can escape from the city at any moment. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something you do for yourself? You hike and walk? That's what you like to do?
Favorite place to escape to is Marin County.
Oh, yeah.
It's you pass the Golden Gate after the city and it's just glorious, I think is the word I have in mind. You can see the ocean, you can see redwoods, just vast countryside. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was born in a town called Redding, California, which is in the kind of it's in the north part of the state, but it's in the middle. Like if you split the state in half from top to bottom, it's kind of right in the middle. And the summers there would get to be like 110 degrees, just pure heat. Like just it would. Like you get into the family station wagon and you sit down on like the little seatbelt buckle and it's like brands, it's like, oh, it's just like so painful. So what we would do, we had like limited means. So we would get the 4 kids, 2 parents in the car, and we would drive out to the redwoods and to this under the sequoias, and we could basically camp, pitch tents under the redwoods, and then go down to this this beach, down this cliff, down this beach, and it was like 50 degrees cooler.
Wow.
So it still remains, from a nostalgia standpoint, one of my very favorite things to do is to go to, it was a place called Patrick's Point at the time, and we would just play in the water and hunt for these little agates, which were like see-through rocks. Have you ever seen these translucent rocks?
I have them in my office.
You do? Oh, I have some in my home. And we would just look for those, and it was the best escape from what was literally felt like the third circle of hell. Like just like,
That's the glorious Northern California coast. Wouldn't trade it for anything.
Heck yeah. Well, that's a good transition. Tell us your virtual hug. Tell us something or someone or maybe a place, something you're grateful for.
I'm grateful for my family, my daughter and my husband. They are my supports. They prop me up when things are tough, and couldn't ask for better people in my life.
Community and people, they lift us up for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. How about we go a different route with that? What is your shameless plug, the things that you're excited about to share to the world?
Well, as I came into this field, I was drawn into going toward trauma therapy. EMDR is what I actually picked up as a recent skill. I've been wanting to do it for over a decade. And so I finally did it, and it's just opened up my mind to so many possibilities around trauma work, especially culturally based trauma and adversity. There's so much information in the EMDR
And
area.
EMDR,
Yeah.
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing
Yes,
therapy.
that is correct.
Yeah. I've gotten familiar with EMDR from a client standpoint. I've done it, and I had a friend describe it this way: of it's like file cabinets that you have in your brain, and some of those get jammed up, or some of them get lost in the back of a closet and things like that. But EMDR, with the eye movements or the taps or however you're doing it, it brings those file cabinets to the forefront and then allows you to open them and go through some things that you probably haven't tapped into in a long time. So it's a powerful modality.
It is. Francine Shapiro, the one who founded it, she basically made it to get it modified. Like, it was going to be modified. So there's so many different things you can do. I'm still researching on that because there's just so much out there. The most recent one I was fascinated by is called the flash technique. And I'm learning a little bit more. I consulted with somebody who made a modified version of that, and he's writing a book in Chinese.
Okay.
So
I'm going to need that translated. What is the flash technique? What do you mean?
So you're not doing the typical bilateral stimulation. It's got blinking involved.
Okay.
And so you're doing a mixture of both. Just to kind of summarize it in a quick synopsis there, it basically is almost like it's a rapid version of EMDR. It's very interesting.
Okay.
I'm still researching that area.
Yeah.
But
What was it 10 years ago that you said, oh, this is interesting to me?
Oh,
Like, what was the
I was working
flashpoint
in
there?
psych case management, and I had a friend saying, hey, it was around 2013 actually, when the World Health Organization recognized it as evidence-based practice. Yes. So happy about that, because it's not just CBT out there. There's so many other things. So when it was acknowledged, insurance companies said yes. Well, insurance companies, I'll leave it at that, period. And basically it became more well-known, more global. So there's like 50 countries, I think, that actually apply it now, which is really cool to know that it's out there like that.
Yeah. It's helping a lot of people for sure. Definitely.
It almost reminds me of like an open source software or something, to take it into a Bay Area lingo, which is like, do you have to like, how much freedom do they have to like take it from, this and then add flashing, and can they just go off with it, or do you circle back to like
I think the objective is you got to go back to the fidelity scale, because EMDR has the fidelity scale. And then there's also other people who stepped away from EMDR because they've just done their own thing. But at the end of the day, it's memory reconsolidation. And that is the magic. My daughter actually called it magic power, because our trainer said, hey, try it on your friends and family. Don't go deep in, but, test it out. And they were like, what is that?
Yeah.
So,
memory reconsolidation? Talk more about that. I've never done it.
Wow.
oh, man. Just think of it as, let's say you got a negative cognition. Shall I go through the phases?
Yeah.
I'll try
let's do
to
it.
run through that quickly. So phase 1 is history taking, and you're basically doing the treatment planning. Then the second phase is like you're explaining, hey, this is what it is, kind of building some resourcing to kind of deal with, you're going to get triggered, right? So you have to make sure the person's nervous system is good. And then the third phase is when you're working on the target memory. So you can do something that's like more recent that's really coming up for you as a theme, like someone going through a divorce. And then you can go to something else around similar theme to a divorce. And then you can even go back, they call it the touchstone memory, which is like usually around early childhood. And there's usually a theme that shows up, like you were talking about the file cabinet earlier. I think when you see it in that aspect, what you're doing is you're trying to turn down the negative cognition, increase the positive cognition. So it's not like you're erasing it. You're saying, hey, it's okay. I've reconsolidated some of these memories into more positive aspects. And so what's happening is phase 4, desensitization. You're doing that bilateral stimulation. And then there's different types within there depending on, you know, if a person has a history of dissociating. There's so many nuances there. The clinician needs to really know what they're doing.
Yeah,
because I've heard
definitely.
some stories and I'm like, eeh.
Yeah.
And then phase 5 is like you're doing the installation and you're kind of like, hey, the validity of cognition. Oh, I just missed a part. So in phase 4, before that, you are starting to understand the subjective units of disturbance. And that's usually on a scale of 0 to 10. And then validity of cognition is how much you believe the new cognition. So that's usually on a scale of 1 to 7. And then desensitization, then you get to phase 5, and you kind of like do the installation. Phase 6 is like any body scan going on, residual stuff. Do you notice how your body's feeling right now? Because there's risks and benefits to therapy, right?
Yeah.
So then you get to 7. If, you know, there's still some stuff to work on, you can kind of like rinse and repeat, start over again. And that's closure. And then the next session, they usually say no more than 2 weeks to revisit, because you got to remember, hey, what happened during that time period? Because I got to be able to evaluate in phase 8.
Yeah. Wow.
That was long.
No, that's good. I think that's some good information. And like, so again, coming from a client perspective, I had never heard it described in that way, but I'm going back through the process of being comfortable with my therapist to get to a place where we're ready to start doing EMDR. Because this, I wouldn't recommend it being like the first thing you jump into, especially if you don't have that rapport with your therapist or have gotten into some of the work that you need to do. And to your point, like your therapist needs to be extremely qualified for it, because you're opening up stuff. You even said it in one of the phases. You will be triggered. You will be triggered. But I heard this once. A trigger is a trailhead to healing, right? Because the trigger is going to be a signal that there was pain there, and if you can bring yourself to a place of regulation, to a place of awareness where you can say, okay, can we walk back and see what was the original pain that we're working with, and why does this association make me feel this way today? Then you can start to heal those things.
To your point, dissociation. So there's this thing called window of tolerance. And
You're speaking my language now.
Yeah,
Let's go.
like you can get to hyper arousal where you're really emoting, although sometimes it'll be a release when you're doing because some people are like, why am I crying? And it's like, it's okay. This is part of the process. Now, if it's getting really aroused, gotta get the person back into the space, do the container and all that stuff. Then there's optimal, which is where you want to keep the person for the sake of safety.
Yeah.
And then there's dissociation, which actually has happened to me. So I understand that aspect where you're just kind of like checked out and you're like, what's going on? Why am I not feeling anything? So I've been there too.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'm curious how you got involved or interested in this field of study and the work that you do. So can you speak to what led to that?
Absolutely. So did you know that 1 in 6 adults have 4 or higher in their ACEs? That's the adverse childhood events. That's a pretty remarkable and alarming number when you think about it, right? Like how many people are experiencing trauma in their life, and then it just kind of gets locked up or they walk through life with it. So my own story is I came to this country, said goodbye to my father, and that was the end of that. And grew up in the Bay Area with several other traumas of repetitive ones. That's when I realized, and I went back to my history, I was like, wow, that is complex trauma. And wow, there are my ACEs. Okay, I made the connection. So it led to like, you know, dropping off in like my academics, my well-being, just mental health, all of it. And then my father passed, my mother passed by the time I was 23. So I was like, wow, here we are again. And that's when I was like, it's time to break from the generational trauma, because there was a lot of stuff to deal with. And I did kind of curb it, really, honestly. As I came into this field, I understood more like the importance of addressing these things, because if you bottle it up inside, it's going to implode, explode, you know, whatever it is, the self-sabotage. I mean, I've worked in chemical dependency, so a lot of it is dual diagnosis. There's ways we're coping with things because that seems like the best outlet. So I really appreciated the social work field because of the social justice piece. Growing up, I remember growing up in Berkeley with just everybody from everywhere, and I appreciated all of that connection about people's cultures, homes. I'd go into people's homes. Of course, this was the 80s. People would just go in people's homes back then. You don't see that anymore. It's like, okay.
It's just the Wild West.
Yeah, really.
You'd actually
It's
walk
like,
into somebody's home.
where's your kid? I don't know. They're outside playing somewhere.
Find the bikes.
Yeah. So I was drawn to social work because the code of ethics, I was like, those are some awesome code of ethics. Like, this is about do no harm. And I actually came across a therapist in the recent past who was like, what you're doing, that's doing harm. You got to change some stuff. So knowing even someone who's licensed that they can still practice things, I will not say any names. I'll leave that because they made some corrections. So I was like, good.
Yeah.
But coming into this field has been a blessing on a spiritual level because it embodies all of the things around advocacy and just trying to heal the world one person at a time. You're not going to heal everybody, but you can do your best.
Yeah.
And control what you can.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you almost can't overestimate, I think, the change that you can make when you start there. When you start at the center and work your way out toward health yourself, then I've experienced, my own lived experience has been resonance, you know, as I corrected the core and as I opened the core to things moving through me, you know, rather than me forcing things forward. You know, for a long time I was on this, I call it the competitive path. I was definitely an athlete, definitely found a lot of my worth or identity in winning, you know, and did well in that. And I came to a point of emptiness with that. You know, it's like the trophies, the things, they just hanging on my wall. It's like, you know, it's like, this doesn't light me up. Why is that? You know? And then it was years and decades of like, from that point forward, but getting onto sort of off of that path, onto a creative path where let me make something for somebody else that makes a difference in their life, you know, and I couch that as of making things of value for people in need. It's like those 8 words are what I come back to. Who's in need? The king, the unhoused, everybody in between, you know, but it's about finding what their need is and then creating something for them. And that's what it feels like you're doing with this new practice that you're in and this journey that you're seeking.
I always say meet people where they're at.
Yes.
Because when you do that, I probably learned that in chemical dependency, is that, you know, harm reduction was a big thing. So it's like, how can we reduce this so we can increase this? And then eventually it becomes let's just increase this, and that other part is just like reduce, like that whole knob thing, turn down some of the negative stuff and turn up the positive stuff, and you get to filter it out.
I've seen that in athletics too. There again, like when I moved from the West Coast out to sort of the Nashville market, I got into, for some reason, I was running from something, but I got into long distance running. Oof. And you get into, or you can get into a lot of mantras, and you can also, well, I should say I also, but it's very common. I can get into some real bad voices in my head about, one voice was, you keep pushing yourself this hard and you're going to die. Like you're going to hurt something irreparably. And, which, you know, you could like get real negative when you're pushing yourself to your extreme. So I was probably outside my physical window, like you're talking about, like disassociation versus like hyperactivity. And I was probably pressing the, even just the physical limits of my body, you know, to see what could happen. And then replacing that with this discipline of a mantra. So it would be like I would be talking about myself as a cloud or a balloon floating up this hill rather than like how hard this was. And I kid you not, I had runner's high one time where I was a demigod of flight. Like I've never described it that way, but that's like what it was, is I was flying with endless energy for miles that I had never experienced before.
What does that feel like?
It was pure magic. And what it always has confused me about that, which I probably need like more therapy for to unpack, help me figure this out, was that I had maybe a couple weeks before that heard a conversation about that very experience, and my mind logged that away as a possibility or a potential reality. And then a couple weeks later, I am like Icarus, you know, for miles, not sweating, not needing water. And then I could never replicate it again.
You got to go further. Was that the thought? Was that ever a thought like, okay, I tapped into it at this point,
I would love to tap into it
and I got to go 20 miles more to feel it again?
I would love to do that. And there is the story of Bruce Lee, which I love, who like the mentee can't, you know, somebody wanted Bruce Lee to be his mentor. And so Bruce Lee runs up this hill with this student, and the student is basically like, Bruce Lee, if we keep going at this pace, I'm going to die. And Bruce Lee says, well, then die. Meaning like unlock that. It was this unlocking that, you know, people talk about it with different things, different modalities or psychedelics or things that unlock your mind. I would love, I don't know where your perspective, Moushumi, on that goes, but like I did have that experience, and it was a very true experience that I can't replicate or haven't yet.
Yeah.
I've tried fasting.
Oh, yeah.
And very interesting kind of experience like that too, where your mind is elevated and you're in this realm where invincibility almost seems probable. So I would say that our mind sometimes can push us through some really hard things.
Absolutely.
Just to simplify it. I was just thinking as you're talking about that, around the reticular activating system. And that's like something I've been interested in. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But what I will say is it's about like your subconscious being able to visualize something to the point where you can actually see yourself in the future without actually being there. And then it happens. And I've done it plenty of times. And call it woo-woo, you know, science or not, it actually, the reticular activating system, they're doing some research out there, and there's articles to back it up, where our subconscious mind, consciousness, science, just interconnected, physics, all of it. It's very fascinating.
It is.
What separates us from animals other than the ability to forecast potential futures and do math on those, you know, probabilities, and then to visualize something that doesn't exist? We're going to stop right there. That's the cliffhanger. We'll be right back with more from Moushumi Sen. At Turn Productions, we craft experiences that connect, engage, and inspire. They feed the mind, they fill the heart, and they fuel connectivity. From dynamic conferences to powerful podcasts, we bring ideas to life through our proven process of planning, production, and promotion. So your audience doesn't just listen, they remember. Ready to make an impact? Let's build something unforgettable together. Visit turn.productions to get started. All right, we're back with more from Moushumi Sen. We cut off at a cliffhanger. You were talking about reticular
Activating system.
And then we launched in the break into a full-on conversation, which we did record. I don't know, maybe we'll cut some of that in, but we started to talk about global consciousness and manifesting the future and all sorts of things.
We nerded out for a minute. Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah. Reggie pulled some things out of his wallet, a little show and tell, but we don't want to lose the audience. So I do want to shift gears a little bit, but I don't want to lose the point there. When it comes to your clinical work and what you're seeing in terms of the importance of the mind to be able to see something before we do it as humans. Talk a little bit more about that and what you've seen work. And I don't judge it as woo or label it as woo. I'm sure people do, but I do this practice in my own life. So what could you say about it?
When I'm engaging with someone who I'm providing service to?
Or doing it yourself, whatever, your own lived experience or clinician work.
I would just say it takes a lot of belief in what you want. Because if someone has a limiting belief showing up, a blocking belief, the desire is just not going to be present. So that even small bit of desire shifts the imagination toward creativity and allows us to flourish. When I'm working with someone, I've actually had, guided imagery, right? It's our visualization. It's just like, hey, where do you see yourself right now? Try a year from now. Try 5 years from now. And tell me what you see. And there have been times where some people are like, I can't see, it's dark, and we'll work with that. And then sometimes I'll have somebody say, oh my gosh, I saw myself doing this. And I was like, well, let's run with that and open that up and explore it further. So it's been a game changer, just being able to use that part of your mind, because we don't know what we're capable of until we try it, really.
How do you distinguish between a belief that I'm saying in my conscious mind, but one that is truly believed in the subconscious, where that change, I believe, truly takes effect? Like if you can say something and it doesn't hold weight, but you really truly believe it in your subconscious, I think that's where the true change happens. How do you distinguish between the two?
That's the beauty of EMDR, and I know I sound like I'm just promoting it like ridiculous.
That's okay.
Scaling. I mean, I use it in motivational interviewing, like, hey, where are you on this? What is it going to take for you to get from this to this? So scaling allows you to understand, hey, this is really disturbing me. I really believe that because it's somewhere I want to be. So sometimes you have to kind of toggle and play between the language, because not all the language is going to look the same for everybody. There's a book I have been following in EMDR. It's called Culturally Based Trauma and Adversity. Mark Nickerson, he's a EMDR consultant, and he opens up that whole piece around like, hey, this might not be appropriate. Try this. And just kind of figure out what's the positive cognition and the negative cognition.
Yeah. I love that you're applying it culturally, right? And understanding some of those traumas that have plagued certain demographics or certain people. And I think back of my own experience. And when you brought up the adverse childhood experiences, that is one of the first points of realization that I had around my own mental health in college, being introduced to it and taking the survey and marking yes on out of 10, 9 originally, 9 out of 10, and 1 being a place that I had a tremendous amount of ignorance, maybe a little shame, was the sexual trauma one. And finally getting to a place where I accepted that, and a full 10 out of 10 on the adverse child experiences study. And having to look back and understand that trauma and how it impacted my life as a Black man in America. And understanding that and asking questions to get to that was the root of me writing my book of PTSD, Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction. And I'm curious how you see this application of EMDR and the work that you do, even beyond EMDR, applying to breaking some of those generational curses in the BIPOC or other marginalized communities.
First, I want to say thank you for sharing that.
I appreciate you.
That takes a lot of courage to come out and talk about that.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're inspiring others out there.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Mental health stigma, a place of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say so there's this thing called cultural competence, which basically is not what it's called. It doesn't mean you're competent in a culture. It means there are components that things like cultural humility and presence, like the felt sense and how you're receiving that person, the elephant in the room, like, hey, we might look different. How's that feeling? You know, just like people think, oh, you're awkward if you ask that question. And it's like, actually, you open up a relationship and a therapeutic alliance starts forming. You're building rapport. So I think as long as you're staying curious, genuinely, that's the biggest piece for someone to open up, because people have their stuff and they're going to get triggered. And if you don't open that up, they're going to shut down and not want to go further. So,
yeah. What are some of the, I guess, barriers for some people who are working with somebody who's not from their particular culture? And culture can be defined in so many different ways. But if you're sitting across from someone in a therapeutic setting and you don't identify with their culture, what are some of the barriers in getting to that competency?
You not talking about it. You have to talk about it and say, is this working for you? And if it's not, let's talk about it. And if it's more appropriate for you to be connected with someone who looks like you and has had the similar experiences, then do so. Because it's like saying, oh, hey, I work with like ADHD and I'm not a specialist, right? That would be inappropriate for me to be, hey, this is what I do. So
yeah,
in
you
that
gotta
instance.
talk about the elephant in the room. I think it also honors and celebrates our differences. Instead of, like, one of the things that I really find troubling about our society is when we say, just the words behind it, like, I don't care if you're Black, I don't care if you're a woman, I don't care if you're Indian. Why don't you care? Why can you not just say you do care, but I also celebrate. I celebrate the fact that you're different than me. I honor the fact that you're different from me. I think if we came from a place of that, then the fear or whatever it is behind not wanting to talk about those differences starts to reduce. And then we can break that wall, build more rapport, and get to the things that we need to get to.
Well, this is where we go to systemic barriers and things that have been happening since hundreds of years ago, maybe close to 1,000 years, of where our mind is colonized to think a certain way. And we think, oh, because laws have been put in place to change things. Well, that's part of the problem, is that we think it's all better, and it's really not. W.E.B. Du Bois said it very well. And he said, people will have their attitudes, laws will change behaviors, but attitudes won't necessarily change just because of laws. So you can change behaviors, but if someone's sitting with implicit bias, they're not even aware sometimes that it happens. And it's like, just come out with it. It's okay. Let's talk. I've had conversations with people who are saying the things that, hey, I don't care about that. And it's like, oh, talk to me about that. I've lived next door to people like that. And it's like, broaching the conversation and saying, what do you see when you see me?
Yeah.
What do I see when I see you?
Yeah.
Let's talk. Share a meal. Share a drink.
Yeah. Break bread. Yeah. When you break bread, you can break some of those barriers. Yeah. Seriously. That, I think that's beautiful that you're having those conversations, and having the stamina for those conversations, because when we get to a place where it is uncomfortable, we like to run from that discomfort. And I think you lean into that discomfort to allow you to sit in that, see what it feels like to be in that moment of someone asking you what it feels like to look at me, or what do you see when you look at me, and really embrace what you're feeling in that moment and be real about it. And like, it's okay if you look at me and tell me that I'm afraid when I walk past you at this, like, okay, now we have it out in the open, and now you can humanize me because we can have a conversation about that. And next time you walk past me, maybe you're not so afraid because I'm a human just like you.
It's something that I think I picked up in grad school, is like, just open it up, because, and when I worked in chemical dependency at one of my internships, it was actually my colleague that I had to broach a conversation with. So I was like, oh, that was interesting. I didn't realize, I thought I was going to talk to somebody I'm serving. I was like, oh, this is unique.
I'm putting something together listening, and it goes back to what we were talking about, like bringing something into reality, or at least having the belief necessary to bring it to reality, and the blocks that we can put on ourselves. I don't know that I can put it fully together here, except to say that I see a lot of people who had lived experiences that were maybe around addiction that go into the clinical care or the social work care around addiction. And it's almost as if that is their realization, or that is their mind's ability to say, I can see enough into the future, into your life, to know the reality, and I've walked through it myself. And you talked about therapeutic alliance, which has to be one of the big factors in somebody being able to sit in the space with you and say, I actually see you, in that deep resonant way. Like I subconsciously, I'm with you, I am you, you're me. We're connected on this, and that leads the conversations forward. But you know, you see it in all sorts of trauma and sexual abuse or eating disorders, that then the people who come through have this disposition oftentimes to go back into the cave. You know, it's like, it's Plato's caves. Like, you see the light, you realize how bright it is, you get adjusted, then you see how dark it was, and then you go back in and you try to help people, and they're like, no, you're whatever, you know, you're lost, but you know the way forward. And it goes back to that manifestation, and probably that thing in your brain which is like, no, I can see the reality enough to help you through it.
Absolutely. I think about Eric Erickson. He is psychosocial development, right? And the stages. And I'm always talking, I'm like, let's see where you are. And people are like, what is this? And I was like, you mean no one's talked to you about this before? Like, this is it. Because then we get to see where we are emotionally. Because we're stuck there sometimes, especially in the childhood years. And even when people come to me as they're older, I'm like, hey, there's a theme here. There's always a theme. And in fact, my training,
that's interesting. That touchstone idea. Go ahead.
Yeah. Because there's implicit memory, which is like up to age 3, and there's explicit, which is 3 to like 5, and then
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of Jung, and it's like what you resist persists. You know, it's like, and there's another author, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, I like, and he says this thing like, when you try to catch a crook, you know, it's not the crime, it's the cover up that gets you. You know, it's the, you know, not to be too crass, but it's like, it's the shallow grave that gets you. You know, it's like in the cover up aftermath. That's what the police find. You know, so there is this like suppression idea. Like if you can get past the it's not the circumstance that's the issue. It's this, we can't talk about X. We can't talk about Bruno. Well, you know what? Everything you're doing, you're talking about Bruno the whole time in that song. My daughter sings that song. It's like, I don't even know. That's like a Disney movie, right? It's like the whole thing is like, we don't talk about Bruno. It's like all our brains hear the whole song is Bruno, Bruno, Bruno. You know, it's like, it's just this way our brain works, you know. And we were talking about this research study off camera at the break where, you know, you present this young child, maybe 5 years old, with an apple and a banana, and you say, choose the one that's not the apple, you know. And the child is initially right. You can see them figuring it out. It's like, okay, I want the banana. I'm going to reach for the banana. And then the adult says again, choose what is not the apple. And the child's brain hears apple and reinforces and also reads the body language from the researcher, which is, I wouldn't say manipulative, but it is like there's intent to like drop that message in. And then you see the child choose the apple because they're trying to, like, you know, maybe there's a little bit of like, I need to please the adult or whatever, but it's also what our brain just hears, which is apple, apple.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's like it's an echo that just won't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just bouncing around in your mind.
And we can only focus on so many things. Like we are apex hunters. Like our eyes are forward. Like we're ready to seek and zone in. And I think it does that in our brain too. Where it's like what you focus on certainly matters, because what I've not been focused on is this plant. And if it's a snake or a tiger, like I'm in trouble, you know, like this echoes way back to like lizard brain. Should I eat it? Should I kill it? Should I mate with it? Like these are basic questions. And then we need to get up here in the top brain where it's like, I can start to connect with you because we've moved up through the social, you know, we know we're peers, we know we're friends, we know, you know, Reggie has his best intention for me and me for him. And then we can get into sophisticated, you know, conversations about how we want to go build the world or what we want to see.
That is interesting because with the background of trauma, lived trauma, research in trauma, we know that as we evolve, that part of our brain is the least evolved, and it's the first to go offline when we get when things get chaotic, we get dysregulated, and we revert back to that reptilian brain, the downstairs brain. I think you called it earlier.
The amygdala? Is that? You got the prefrontal neocortex.
Amygdala hijack.
And then you got like lizard brain back here, which is like, I need to figure out if this is a threat.
Yes.
And I also don't want this brain to have to deal with every last thing. So it's not like you want me to send this table information up to the top level of my brain, which is very leveraged and very out here. And so it's like, you got to be novel, you got to be safe and novel, but interesting, and then I'll let you pass.
Yeah.
You know? But that's connected to like, then people getting into like the vagus nerve and that, like, why is there the phrase like trust your gut? You know, well, it's because it knows first.
Yeah.
You know, it's because it's probably like even more connected to our base.
Yeah. I'm curious, just how do you see the work really impacting generational trauma? So one of the biggest parts of my advocacy work is I talk about breaking the curse of intergenerational trauma. And for me, I think that comes with there are systemic things that are at play that lead to some of that trauma and perpetuate a lot of that trauma. On the other side, though, I think there is also a cycle of generational resilience that is built because we are here. And if we're here and we're able to get to a place of thriving and flourishing in life, that there's possibility, seeing in the future that there is hope. How do we continue that pattern and get to a place where there is more hope, where there is more healing for all people? What does that journey look like?
I say self-awareness. When I think of like who transfers culture, it's women, right? So if you think about in a household of women passing the culture down generation after generation, what happens when suddenly a woman transfers the culture differently? Dr. Joy DeGruy, I met her in person in 2012. She's awesome. She is a great storyteller, and she talks about somebody making meatloaf in a pan. I think it was meatloaf, and that they were using the same pan over and over again. They're like, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, because this is how we've been doing it for generation. Why would we switch? this is the tradition. And it's like,
This is the
will it
meatloaf
still
pan.
cook the same? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's how generational trauma feels.
Wow.
Is that you don't want to adjust because you don't want to disrupt. And if you disrupt, what can happen? Chaos?
It's unknown.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
we had that growing up. We had each kid had an aluminum cup. You know, there was like a maroon, a gold, a green, and a blue. I was blue, and I was always blue. You know, and it got beat. Like they all got beat. Kind of beat up. You know, like over time. But it was like that's the cup. Or if you go to like church on a regular basis, like people sit in the same spots, or in conferences. You know, like we'll let people go out on a break after a presentation. They come back and they sit in the exact same spot. Like we have these needs or instances where we're looking for, and there's something to be said about finding a home. You know, you're at a conference and I don't know most of these people here. I'm in kind of a place of potential danger. Like, you know, it's like mild, but it's very mild, but it's like actually very deep and rich. And so we find our little homes, we find our little nests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was me last year. Came here in October. I didn't know so. And then I made all these connections. So your conference is a game changer. I keep on telling people.
Thank you.
Come,
Yes.
yeah, it is.
I love that. I love those stories. I connected two people by text yesterday that met each other through the conference. Well, they both came to the conference. They both know me. And then I connected the dots for them, and they're off to the races with some really impactful stuff. But it's all year round, little echoes, little ripples in the water that we get to make connections. So thank you. I mean, so much. I'm really honored for you to come out and be on the show and your clinical voice and what you're digging into. And yeah, it's a wonderful conversation. We're going to have to end, which is the only reason I would end this. I'd talk to you for a while. And we do this with a question, which is like, tell us something you are either reading or watching or listening to, or that you want to listen to, something on your list or something that you've read or done, listened to lately.
I did the audiobook, The Hidden Spring, talking about consciousness. Very good.
With that, we're going to wrap this delightful conversation with Moushumi Sen. Thank you so much again. We'll see you soon.
Moushumi.
Thank you for having me here. Thankful to be here to have some conversations with Steve Turney and Reggie Ford on The Boost today. Major thanks to the production team as well. My name is Moushumi Sen. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and an EMDR trained therapist. I have an office in El Cerrito, California, and the name of the office is Bayside Counseling and Consulting. I do both virtual and in-person EMDR therapy. That is eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. My current EMDR consultant, Unetta Spring, has a BIPOC directory that I belong to. It's called Groundbreakers, where she promotes culturally informed care. My practice works with professional BIPOC women who are mothers who have experienced culturally based trauma and adversity and find themselves getting overwhelmed with a lack of balance in their life and want some answers for themselves on how to get some balance. You can find more information at moushumisen.com. I wanted to take a moment here to emphasize on the significance of solidarity with the Black community, especially women in that community, as they need support from the people of this country now more than ever. Women transfer cultures, and that is why I'm focusing on the women specifically. I'm of South Asian descent, and I'm making a request to stand in solidarity with them. And there's actually been a history with South Asians and the Black community it goes dating back several decades. And it teaches us that everyone belongs in this country. We need allies from all communities, whether they are part of communities of color or not. You can find more info on blackdesisecrethistory.org, which has been written by Anirvan Chatterjee, and he tells a story about archives on South Asians and Black solidarity dating back several decades. You can also attend the Berkeley South Asian Radical History Walking Tour, where he and his partner, Barnalee Ghosh, have curated an amazing experience.
Here is how I stand in solidarity with Black women. In November 2024, I attended the National Association of Social Workers Conference in Oakland, California, and I had gotten to know and had the opportunity to meet two very impressive social workers. First, Dr. Maria Wright, who is a board member. She's actually the one who I get to be a vendor at her event. It's the second annual self-care walk, and that's actually how I do my own self-care. She's in the space where she's celebrating social work's impact on our communities here in California. And she is always about uplifting people. Next, I would like to also support Dr. Jasmine Smith. I attended her workshop at the NASW conference on intersectionality of violence, exploring the impact of race, class, and gender on Black women. The metrics were really telling, and I made some clear distinctions on how racial bias has become a barrier in building trust, increasing divisions between white and non-white communities, and even divisions within communities of color. So she's asking for support on people to pay attention to these metrics where she did some research on. And so historically, there have been systematic efforts like Jim Crow and Black Codes to intentionally reduce access to education, healthcare, voting rights, and economic progress in the Black community. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 not only affects the Black community, it also affects other communities of color, which I think is really important for the audience to listen to. This piece of information is valid in why we need to support and be in solidarity with Black women and how we can continue to support them. Culturally based trauma and adversity in EMDR can address some of these issues, which has been researched by both EMDR consultants Mark Nickerson and David Archer. EMDR is now in a place where they're well positioned to become a model for culturally aware and effective trauma-informed care. EMDR is now in a place also to really promote the research that they found on anti-racist psychotherapy. If you're ever looking for an EMDR therapist, you can go to emdria.org, that's emdria.org, and you can find EMDR therapists who are meeting the fidelity of their organization and basically following the standards. Well, that's it for me. Thank you.